spoke differently than the taller ones. He said that the smaller ones seemed robotic almost, and the taller ones with this telepathic communication spoke more naturally, like you and I would speak to each other. And so he was able to. Oh, go ahead. Did you want to cut it?
I said interesting.
Oh, yeah. It certainly is, and so he was able to understand some of this telepathic communication, and he said that some of it seemed to he could make sense out of it, put it into words, and then other parts of it were just him sort of interpreting almost the language of emotion, like they were more communicating in sort of feelings and images and stuff. But he was able to parse out that they didn't think he was supposed to be awake. Like, they were surprised that he was awake for this part of it. Like, that wasn't natural. He wasn't supposed to be awake. And he said that he got the sense that it was sort of a privilege that he was even able to understand them at all. And at one point, because during this procedure, whatever they're doing to him, he's again terrified, just out of his mind with fear. And at one point, he said he remembered asking them, to this is a direct quote, "Please turn the fear off in me." And that's how he said it. He literally just requested, "Please turn the fear off in me." And they seemed to acquiesce, because directly after that, he said, this peaceful feeling came over him, and he just wasn't scared anymore. So he goes on, and he has questions, obviously. He asked, "Why are you doing this?" And they responded, "It is necessary. It is necessary for the human race." And that's about all that he would talk about. Now, a lot of our conversations delved more into sort of the theoretical realm. It seemed like this experience had sort of opened some doors for him intellectually, sort of. And so, he wanted to talk about broad theories of reality and sort of, the forces behind the universe and how the world works and all this other stuff. And it took a lot for him to even tell me specifically the parts of the story that he did. And, and even after talking to him several times since, I can't shake this feeling, and it's more or less been confirmed by him. There's a lot of story that was left on the table. And so there are parts to this that he's still so scared to talk about that I don't know if we'll ever learn that, frankly. But whatever it was, it scared him so badly that like these are the only parts of the story that he was willing to share.
Well, that. So I'm sorry, but something like that would really, really mess you up. I mean, coming back and remembering it after a long period of time. But I had a guest on here last week. It kept saying, aliens or. I keep hearing this from either about Bigfoot or aliens. They're warm, fuzzy. They're here to protect the Earth. They this, and this, right? Well, if I look at it this way: if they abduct you or me, right, and implant us with something, take us up on a UFO or whatever they're in, experiment, take our DNA or take your eggs from a female or whatever they all do in DNA. Now, is that something that's warm and friendly and wants to protect Earth? I think they're really, it's the lowest you can go is to abduct people. Yeah, they're lucky they get to go back home, but, eventually, even with their mind wiped, they kind of start remembering little things down the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point, and it's something that I've said a lot. People will say, or people will relate these sort of comforting messages they say that they've received during abduction experiences, and my response to that, and I try not to sound too flippant or anything, but it's usually something along the lines of, so what? I don't know why anybody would think, under the circumstances, if what abduction experiencers are saying is true, that you would trust a word that came out of the mouth of something that just, tore you out of bed to molest you and terrify you. Does that seem like a trustworthy individual? Does that seem like does that seem like somebody whose opinion you would give just a whole lot of credence to? Not me personally. So I'm kind of with you on that. I don't really care what people say that they're told during these experiences. At the very best, if you're giving, assuming it's all true, and you're giving these beings the benefit of the doubt, I think is as best as you can. At the very least, they're guilty of such a cruel indifference, like bordering on evil, that I would happen to think that people would just be better off never encountering them.
Oh, yeah. So, well, what would happen, if the guy down the street abducted you or your wife, right, and took you across state line? When they get him, he's going to go to prison for a long time because it's against the law. What gives these aliens the right to grab you out of your bed or out of your car or out of wherever they find you and then abduct you, implant you, and then return you? And I have actually even had people tell me that claim they were abducted, they were not even returned to the right place. Could you imagine being abducted out of your car in the middle of winter and then they return you, but they don't return you back into your car?
Sure. That's more common. It's more commonly reported, I think, than people might be aware. I've heard of people being taken, and then maybe they come to and they're outside, and they're usually in their own yard at the very least. But maybe they wake up and their clothes are on backwards, or they're outside in their backyard, or whatever else. But at the same time, and I don't like to present any rhetorical fallacies like arguments from ignorance or anything, but for the sake of speculation, I think it's fair to consider how many people go missing every year. And we have no real explanation for whatever happened to them. If we know that some people, or at least strongly suspect that some people are being taken, then it might be at least reasonable to consider the idea that maybe more things go wrong than we think. Maybe a certain percentage of people aren't coming back. So who knows?
Maybe when they do their examination, somebody might keel over dead with a heart attack or whatever,
sure.
And then they disposed of them, how they disposed of the bodies. But it's just been like we've talked before. So many people have gone missing, not just in the national forest, which I find that is really strange. Really strange, because like I told you before on this, people could go out hunting and somehow fall off a cliff or get swept down a river or fall off a whatever, but not as many people that has gone missing from 1900 to I think 2014. There was like over 14,000 plus people who gone into a national forest and never seen again. Now, I can't believe that many people went into the forest and got lost, and that was the end of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's a really good point. It's troubling, say the least, especially when you consider some of the associated phenomena that people report. One of the things that really struck me, like if you read, I'm going to make sure I say his name right. If you read David Pallades, like his work is one of the more relatively common things in those cases. And again, this is extremely disturbing to me, is oftentimes if a body is recovered from one of these missing persons, it will be recovered in an area that was previously searched, or someplace really, really out of the way, someplace that, they can't conceive of how this victim might have ended up there, like a few thousand feet, up a mountain or something, way off the trail. And yeah, I mean, you have to wonder, certainly some people are going to be very unprepared for hiking or camping or whatever, and bad stuff happens. And yeah, certainly, the wilderness can be dangerous, and people will occasionally die, but, I just can't imagine how they would manage to die in a way where their corpse would appear suddenly later in an area that had already been searched. And I'm not saying that that's aliens necessarily, but it is really, really weird. And if people aren't even questioning that, then I just don't know what to tell people. I mean, it's too weird not to question. And the people who are found alive later, which does happen sometimes, they will report all kinds of crazy things, like, being able to hear the people looking for them, very nearby, but, when they shout, nobody can hear them, and just crazy stuff that makes, at least, in my imagination, like, makes me think of things like, parallel universes and time anomalies and just all of the science fiction stuff that could explain the laws of physics suddenly working completely contrary to how we expect them to work, in these certain areas in state parks for whatever reason. It's interesting.
I just want to say you're starting to break up off and on here again. But, the thing is that, like these people that vanish, I've had guests on that talk like portals, out in the forest that, they supposedly all of a sudden seen a portal and a Bigfoot emerged out of it. Well, hey, I don't know. Maybe it's possible. Maybe it's not. But maybe these people are out in the forest, right? And there's portals going to another universe or wherever they go, or up to a UFO, and they walk in it and that's the end of them. You never know. But some of these things like the missing people, like I mentioned again when we talked last time, I think, the one case that really infatuated me was with the father was out, setting up the tent. The mother was right there. They had a 5-year-old kid. He was like around 20 feet away from the father who was setting the tent up. The father was keeping a real good eye on his kid, took his eye off maybe for 30 seconds, and his kid is gone. So, here comes the Rangers. They start looking for him. They don't find him the first day. The second day, they're out looking. Now, you have to understand, in that area, there's rivers and creeks and all this stuff, and rivers that even you or me couldn't cross. 15 miles later, up a side of a mountain or whatever it is, they find the remains of the child. And with his clothes, he was nude, and his clothes were off to the side, kind of like folded up. Isn't that kind of strange?
Well, I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing I was talking about. That's extremely strange. It shouldn't happen. I'm sure that on a certain level, people almost have to rationalize stuff like that. because the alternative is probably